Thank you. I'm calling this session the Board of Revision to order and acknowledge that we're in Treaty 1 territory, the home and traditional lands of the Anishinaabe, Ojibwe, Innu Cree, and Dakota peoples, and the national homeland of the Red River Métis. Our Treaty 1 are comes from Shoal Lake 40 First Nation and Treaty 3 territory. My name is Harvey Diamond. I'll be chairing today. With me are Mr. Ron Merritt and Mr. Kevin Stephenson. The City of Winnipeg Assessment Department is being represented by Karen DeRockney, and our administrator is Zachary Moen. We'll be hearing application for revision of the assessment rules in accordance with the Municipal Assessment Act. The matters for which revision are requested and described in each application, and we will limit discussion to those matters. The statements that are made at this hearing are sworn testimony, and anyone speaking to a matter must first be sworn in. Be advised, the comparisons of assessments of properties are not considered as evidence at market value by the Board of Revision. The Board of Revision is appointed annually by Council and is independent of it and the City Administration. It makes its decisions on the basis of the evidence provided at this hearing and issues a written order that will be mailed to all parties as soon as possible. Please note that the Board's decisions with respect to the application may be appealed to the Manitoba Municipal Board if the matter pertains to assessed value or to classification, or to the Court of King's Bench if the matter pertains to an application for exemption from taxation. And should you wish to appeal, information on do so will be included with our order. With respect to the hearing process, I will confirm the points of appeal with your property to be addressed with each applicant following their swearing in. We'll then have the assessment assessment followed by questions that the applicant may have, and the applicant's assessment followed by any questions. And each side will give an opportunity to summarize if they wish to do so. Once all the evidence on an application has been brought forward, the applicant may leave. The person will repeat for each item on the docket today, and the session will close after all applications have been heard. And the board will deliberate in private to make decisions. You receive the board's decision by written mail as soon as possible. As information, all public hearings are live streamed, recorded, and will form part of a public record. And today we'll be hearing items 1 to 5 and 8 and 9 on our docket. And Mr. Moen, if we can recess this matter, we're awaiting Mr. Marcel Navarro's attendance, and then we swear in both the assessor and Mr. Navarro and start on the docket.
So yes,
Sorry.
Madam Assessor, can you please state your full name?
Karen DeRockney.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we can recess till Mr.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Chair, we do have the applicant right here right now.
Oh, good.
Just arrived. Okay, Mr. Applicant, please state your full name.
Marcelo Navarro.
Do you affirm that the evidence you're about to give at this hearing is the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. You may be seated.
Okay, well then, now that both parties have been sworn in and we are ready to go, we can hear agenda item number 1, 58 Weston Street. And Ms. DeRockney, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Of course. For our number 1, file number 24-3802, roll number 13062310000 for the address of 58 Weston Street. We are defending the assessed value of $3,603,000 for the 2025 rural year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 4 buildings, 1 premise with 1 story. The actual year built is 1966 to 1997. We have an effective year build of 1981 with a wall height of 16 to 22 feet, a leasable area of 41,157 square feet, and a land to plan area of 3.32. If I can bring your attention to our page 2, it shows a 2016 sale in the amount of $2,450,000. Maps are provided on page 3 showing its location. It is located in the Pacific Industrial Area. It is near Notre Dame Avenue and off of Weston Street. There are exterior photos provided on page 4, as well as aerial views following it on page 5 and 6. Our page 7 has our rent comparables. They are net rents from the market in which our model is based off of. We've provided 5 rent comparables. All are storage warehouses with leasing starting in 2019 to 2022, an area range of 31,987 to 47,000 square feet with a wall height of 12 to 24 feet, an effective year build of 1964 to 1980, and a net rent of $7 to $8.60 per square foot. You'll find our income workup on page 8. The 41,157 square feet has a rent of $7.41 per square foot, provided potential rent of $304,973. We reduced that by a vacancy loss of 4% plus expenses at 3%, with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $277,406. We've capitalized that at 7.7%, in which generates our capitalized value of $3,602,675. We rounded that up to $3,603,000. Page 10 is our, you'll find our capitalization rates, in which we provide the industrial range of 5.35 at the 20th percentile to 7.30 at the 80th percentile. Our 7.7 is higher than our 80th percentile. Page 12 is page 12 to 17 is the income and expense questionnaire that was provided to us with the income statement on page 13. The questionnaire completed on page 14 advises the net income type with the rent income of $201,000, with the total leasable area 34,891. This would provide a 5.76 rent. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $3,603,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, do you have any questions of the assessor?
I do.
Please proceed.
Okay. Would you agree that there is some manufacturing that actually occurs at this location?
To be honest, I'm not certain what happens at this location.
Okay. Maybe I'll get into that with my presentation. Would you agree that 89 Bunting is a multi-tenanted warehouse, not a single occupant warehouse?
And Bunting. I do not know what the tenant space is like, just that it's a similar storage warehouse. And M2. I'm not sure if it's multi-tenanted. No, sorry.
Okay. And 333 debates, that is in St. Boniface, correct?
Correct.
Now, again, with 1670 Inkster, are you aware that this is a multi-tenanted warehouse?
I am not. No.
Okay. So lastly, do any of your comparisons have cold storage areas?
I would not know that information, no.
Okay, those are my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and not at this time.
Okay. So, Mr. Buckney, just where Mr. Navarro was questioning, I'm looking at your rent comparables, and he did too. And are any of them in the same area as a such a property?
Looking at it now, no. It was difficult finding a similar property in the same area.
Okay. And I know there is a discrepancy. You have as low as $7 rent on Inkster, and it was high as $860 in St. Boniface. Do you know how location might affect the rent on such a property?
I'm not 100% certain about location aspect, but more so I was trying to find comps with the same leasable area as the property. In regards to location, yeah, it was difficult to find a similar comparable to that location.
Okay, that's fair. I mean, you can't find properties that don't exist. So I'm not being, I was just questioning. Uh, Next question, though, is on the cap rate. I know that if you look at your page number 10, you show industrial cap rates. You show at 20% it would be about 5.35, and at 80% of the properties that would have a high of 730. So this is higher. Do you have any reason to explain why this would have such a high cap rate?
I do not. It was model generated with that aspect and all the attributes that the subject property has. Yeah, nothing that really pinpoints why it is that high. To be honest, yeah, it was just model generated to be that cap rate.
Okay, thank you very much. Mr. Navarro, you can proceed.
Okay, this is 58 Weston. And this is between Notre Dame and Logan Avenue. And it is just slightly north of the corner of Weston and Notre Dame. So I'll ask you to turn to page 4. So part of the issue with this property is that there's not many in this area that we can draw from. And in terms of the use of this property, this is a manufacturing warehouse. There is actually manufacturing that occurs in this location. So it does differ somewhat from a standard storage warehouse or a logistics warehouse. So I went out and I did an inspection of this on December 23rd. And on page 6, you can see the map, the overhead map of the property. And I basically laid it out as I saw it during my inspection. So on the very top side, you can see a storage warehouse. And I don't know if you can distinguish, but there's essentially 3 different roof lines in that warehouse. And the one that actually has the arrowhead right on top of it is actually cold as well. The rest of it is heated, but actually when we walked in there, it was cold. So I assume that sometimes they maintain it cold, but I did see that there were certain overhead heaters on there. Now, just below that on the left-hand side, there is what I call this a cold storage warehouse. So in that one, it is perfectly cold in there. There was no heating in there. They use it as cold storage. And next to that, you can see the filling warehouse and the gas tanks that are there. And beside that, to the very right-hand side is the retail and office area. The entire property was built in different stages. And again, it is used for the, I'm not sure what the process of creating this type of gas is, but they produce commercial gases. Now, the approach that we're using is the income approach. I had a look at several warehouses, which are just your standard logistics and storage warehouses. I came up with a very similar issue in that while they're similar in size, they're not really similar in their use. And the subject itself again, has a lot of like cold storage areas that, that I'll describe as kind of beat up. So we have a rent in place, starting from December 15th, 30th to December 29th of 2030. So it's basically a 15-year lease. I went with this because I believe that that's basically the best representation of what the market value is for this location. I had a hard time justifying using a storage rent, so I went with the actual. So that produces a market income of $237.64. In terms of vacancy, this is a single occupant building. It's not vacant, so we use the standard market vacancy, standard shortfall, and 3% non-recoverable expenses. In terms of the cap rate, we used a higher cap rate, 7.75, which I think is reflective of the location. It's in an awkward situation. It's in an awkward location because access and egress out of the location is fine, but once you get into the main thoroughfares, you're having to go either through Logan or through Notre Dame, which are not easy at the best of times to get through. So this is an older industrial area. So I think that's why the cap rate is typically higher for this location. Now, we typically base cap rates on quarter points, 25 points, not usually anything between that. So we have it at 7.75. We have an income value of $2,763,473, and that obviously would be rounded to $2,763,000. In the appendix, on page 21, you can see the building details, and you can see that there is essentially 4 stages to this property. Next, on page 22, you can see some older pictures. This was a prior inspection done around 2018. And you can see the different areas. So what they called 1967 dead storage, I called cold storage. And then you can see further pictures on page 24 and 25. We have the income and expense questionnaire which the assessor has also included. And then on page 32, we have the warehouse where I am actually starting my analysis on, where I did my inspection. So the first 4 pictures on page 32 are of the storage warehouse. And then page 33, the cold storage, which was noted as dead storage before. The filling warehouse, where the manufacturing actually occurs, on page 34, and the retail and office areas on page 35. And I am open for questions.
Mr. Rockney, any questions?
I do, yes, thank you. For just clarification, I was looking at your page.
Sorry, I'm out of assessor. Is there any way to increase the volume of your mic? On our end, we're having a difficult time hearing you.
How about now?
That's it. Yeah. Can you say a few more sentences? Just for...
Can you hear me better now?
Yeah, I want to say something. Sorry. A little better? Yeah, let's give her a go.
Okay. I'll try and speak louder.
Okay.
On your page 6, yes, when you had labeled everything, so the cold storage you're indicating is 4260 square feet?
The cold storage, I believe, would be 3260 or 4260.
4260, okay. And where does the manufacturing take place?
It would be the area that's labeled filling warehouse.
And what type of manufacturing takes place?
That would be mixing of commercial gases. And these would be for use in I forget what the industry is called. It's basically for what is it called?
Well,
Acetylene torches and stuff like that. So where those types of tools are used.
And I just had another question in regards to, you didn't have any comparables for the property?
I did. Actually, if you turn to page 14, you can see the comparisons that I found. And in terms of the size, they're fine. The problem is that these are different types of structures. So I think I've made the point that the bulk of those, actually all of them, are essentially larger storage or logistics warehouses, which are laid out differently and have different amenities than, say, this property that is, again, has some dead storage or cold storage areas, some manufacturing areas. I'm not going to talk about the office or retail because that's common for most industrial buildings to have some office or retail area. So I think it's slightly different. And that's probably a reflection of the rental rate for it, along with some other things. I mean, it's in my opinion, it's not the best location in terms of egress and access from the location itself. It's fine, but once you get out of that area, it's harder to navigate through there until you finally get to Route 90.
Are any of your comparables in the same area?
So again, dissimilar area. However, they are based almost exclusively in the northwest side of the city. And our subject, I think, would be considered part of the northwest side of the city.
Thank you. One more question.
thank you. Mr. Mayor, any questions?
Harvey, did you ask me?
I asked you, yes. Do you have any questions?
Yes. Mr. Navarro, in your presentation, you have in your presentation leasable area of 43,891. However, you are using the city's 41,157. So why did you specify that it's only, close to 35,000 square feet leasable, whereas the city is much higher?
Well, so if you turn to page 28 of the brief,
Okay.
you can see that the owner actually writes the leasable area as 34,891. Sorry, 34,891.
But you've used, in your
I've used a higher area.
Yeah.
And we are going by the idea that this is a gross area. So for an industrial property, you would go with the overall gross area. And I think that's what the difference is.
And I think you specified that the cold storage area is 4,260 square
Yeah.
feet, correct?
Yeah.
So, but I'm just trying to calculate where the difference is, and what is the percentage of cold storage space then? Is that 10%?
Well, if we go by the description, if you give me a second here while I calculate these areas out.
Well, if you go by the cities and, what you've used, it's roughly 10%.
Yeah.
Right? Okay.
Yeah.
So And you did do an inspection, so it is cold storage, is it not? Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
And your cap rate is 7.75, 7.75, and the city's at 7.70. So you're fairly close in that respect. I think that's all the questions I have, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stephenson, any questions?
No questions. Thank you.
Thank you. So, Mr. Navarro, on page number 14, you have shown some you consider comparable properties, and they have an average rental, according to what you've got there, of $7.28, correct?
Correct. The only thing that I would find comparable about those properties is the size.
Okay, but you have put them down and you have put the rents down. So you are showing a comparable for properties this size of having an average rental of 728, correct?
Yes, again, based on the comparable size, not anything else.
Okay, and do any of those properties have cold storage in them?
They do not.
And would cold storage not be something that would be more expensive? Yeah, because you got to provide facilities for cold storage that aren't required, just a room. Is that not true?
I think the definition of cold storage may be different. So what I would define as a cold storage warehouse, like you would see in older parts of Winnipeg that are specifically built cold storage warehouses, are one thing. What I mean by cold storage in this case is that it's unheated.
Oh, okay. So there's nothing to provide cold storage other than the weather.
Yeah, I mean, like when you walk into it, you can see your breath. If you lay down some water on it, you could skate in it in the winter. So by that definition, it's just unheated, and you know, it's affected by the elements. I mean, you can see by the condition of the property that lack of heating actually does you know, help the building deteriorate faster.
So in the summer, if you walked into it, you wouldn't consider it cold storage, you might consider it
Sauna.
heated storage then.
Sauna, yeah. Yeah, it would be hot.
And you say manufacturing goes on. Okay, you indicated manufacturing goes on here, and I know the question was asked. What kind of manufacturing? Are they manufacturing these volatile gases there, or just storing them there?
No, actually, you can see the mixing facilities inside. I couldn't get into it because I needed its special attire to get into that area because it's I guess it's somewhat dangerous, so you have to wear special clothes to get in.
Okay, and this company makes actually gases that are used by welders to weld. Is that not true?
Welding, that's the word. Welding.
So those are the gases are acetylene. Is that correct?
I don't think it's just acetylene. I think it's a mixture of different gases that they manufacture.
Maybe an oxygen, you know, because there often there's two tanks. You have an acetylene tank, oxygen tank, and that's what mixes the point of
Exactly.
what's ignited.
Exactly, and I believe they actually sell to medical facilities and things like that for different uses. It's not just welding related.
Okay. And as Mr. Merritt already pointed out, I think you're basically very close on cap rates. It seems to me the cap rate was high, but if you've come to that and the model came to that, who am I to argue? But when you say the rent, is the rent market rent or is it just unique to this property?
I would believe that the market rent is the rent that you would pay for this property. So in that sense, I would define it as a market rent. Why is it lower than the other warehouses that we're looking at in the comparisons of both sides? I think there's just a difference in the type of buildings, and I think that's why it's got a lower rent. So when I said that there's a difference between a standard storage and logistics warehouse versus this type of facility, it speaks to, first of all, some of the condition of the buildings, what they're used for, and their condition and age, which would also factor into the rent as well. And also location. So all of those factors would play a part in determining the rent. But so if you're asking me whether I think it's a market rent, I do believe it is a market rent.
Okay, and just to confirm, I'm going to ask you one last question. Is the lease at arm's length from the landlord? To
Yes,
the
it
tenant?
is. Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's completes my questions. Thank you very much. Okay, so we've finished with this item. So we can go on with item number 2, which is 495 Berry Street. And when you're ready, Mr. Rockney, you can proceed.
Okay. File number 24-3082 for roll number 0702191600 for the address of 495 Berry Street. We are defending the assessed value of $2,604,000 for the 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 2 buildings with 7 premises, 1 story. The actual year build is 1959 to 1966. We have an effective year built of 1960 with a wall height of 11 to 16 feet, a leasable area of 31,000 square feet, and a land to plan area of 1.42. Maps are provided on page 3 showing its location. It is near Century Street off of St. Matthews Avenue. Exterior photos on page 4 and aerial photos page 5 and 6. Page 7 has our rent comparables. They are net rents from the market in which our model is based off of. We provided 11 rent comparables, all flex warehouses, with leasing starting in 2019 to 2022, an area range of 525 to 24,000 square feet, wall height of 12 to 18 feet, an effective year built of 1955 to 1966, and a net rent of $6.75 to $11.75 per square foot. You'll find our income workup on page 8. The 7 premises adding up to 31,000 square feet has a blended rent of $6.59 per square foot. Provide a potential rent of $204,196. We reduce that by a vacancy loss of 4.5% plus expenses at 3%, with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $183,577, in which we've capitalized that at 7.05%, in which generates our capitalized value of $2,603,929, rounded up to $2,604,000. You'll find our capitalization rates on page 10, in which provide the industrial range of 5.35 at the 20th percentile to 7.30 at the 80th percentile. Our 7.05 is at the high end of this range. The income and expense questionnaire was completed and provided to us on page 12 and 13. It advises partially owner occupied with a net rent of $129,759 with a leasable area of 30,600, which appears to be a $4.24 rent. On page 13, it lists all the tenants, in which appears to be a $6.27 blended rent. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $2,604,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
I don't have any questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, do you have any questions?
I have none, Mr. Diamond.
Thank you. Mr. Stephenson, do you have any questions?
Can you just clarify again what portions owner occupied again, please?
Well, it indicated on page 12 that it is partially owner occupied. I'm not quite certain which part is exactly because it lists a bunch of tenants there. There's 7 premises. Perhaps Mr. Navarro will be able to answer that question.
Fair enough. Thank you. No further questions.
And I have no questions, so thank you. And so, Mr. Navarro, you can proceed.
Okay, this is 495 Berry Street. If you turn to page 9, you can see an overhead picture on page 8 and 9, which shows the general location. On page 13, I'll give you a few seconds to turn to that. So we are using a slightly different size than the assessor, slightly higher at 31,752. I guess to answer the assessor's question regarding the owner occupied, I'm not actually sure that it does. It is owner occupied in any way. I mean, we went over the leases. The leases appear legitimate. They're not of the owner, so I don't see where the owner is actually occupying this building. Based on our review, we have 8 leases, and the size is reflected. The overall size of 31,752 is reflected in that. Varying sizes, the largest unit is obviously the unit 495 at 16,147. So how we assigned these rents was basically just adjustments based on the comparisons that you see on page 14. And I mean, the reason why we took those rents above the actuals is because we're not, most of them are actually some type of gross or semi-gross. So it was actually easier to default to market in this case. We have not a large disparity in terms of the overall value based on rent. So for the most part, vacancy collection and shortfall and non-recovered expenses are going to be the same. We're not questioning any of those. We've defaulted to the market parameters used by the city as well. And in terms of cap rate, we've used an 8% cap rate on this property, producing an overall value of $2,244,966. That's $2,245,000 rounded. Now, the cap rate, as you can see on page 16, there's several different reasons why we adjust the cap rate. First of all, being age of the property. I think the original building for this property was built in 1959. But there are also other factors that we see as being detrimental to this location. The second being the exceptionally low land to building ratio at 1.38 to 1. So for most industrial properties, especially properties that function as some type of storage warehouse, ideally what you would want to see is a 3-to-1 ratio, and this is well below that. So beyond that, we are looking at the income and expenses that were submitted by the owner, and I am open for questions.
Thank you, Mr. Buckley. Any questions?
Maybe just one in regards to the cap rate at 8%. Is it often that there are many properties that would have an 8% cap rate?
I mean, there are quite a few properties in Winnipeg that we classify as being higher than 8%. I wouldn't say that it's the largest majority of our properties in terms of what we look at. And if we go by percentiles, we would probably see the lowest percentile of properties basically being in this cap rate, at this cap rate level or higher. So to answer your question, no, it's you don't see too many properties that are above 8. But the factors are that we look at are, specifically how much land does it have in it, how old is it, and the location. So those are the general reasons we're adjusting for cap rate. And there is also, for example, the height of the walls. So, modern warehouses start at about 22 feet. So we're looking at a structure that is 12 to 20 feet. And I think that's probably well below the standard. So I think those are the reasons why we've adjusted so high.
Okay, fair enough. Possibly just a follow-up question in regards to the tenants. Because they're fully tenanted, is that part of the calculation as well, or no?
In what sense?
That it's not at a risk in a sense.
Well, I would probably take a look at the leases that are in place. So it is fully tenanted at this time, but I mean, you can see the lease start and end dates and see that the covenants aren't extremely strong. So for a strong covenant, we would be looking at 10 years. If we're looking at, a short covenant, it's 5 years. So most of these are actually, below that, except for the last one, which is Dicom Direct Mail. That is quite old. So I would say that for the most part, you're not looking at overly strong, covenants here.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Mr. Stevens, any questions?
So on page 21, like you submit the property income expense questionnaire, it says it's partially owner occupied. So you don't know which one of those tenants is the owner.
I don't. I can't identify them because the owner is someone else. So, I don't know.
Yeah, I find that confusing a little bit, right? Like just
Yeah. And I mean, it does happen that sometimes it's a sleight of hand. They cross the wrong box. So
yeah, maybe.
yeah.
Or the same owner of the two companies, I guess, right? The one that's in there and the owner of the building. But okay, no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, Mr. Rivera, I'm looking at your rent roll, and I noticed that the oldest lease, Dicom Direct Mail, also has a $4.05 per square foot rate. Is that maybe the owner?
I can't answer that, Mr. Chairman. But I
Being the
don't
old-
know.
Yeah, being the oldest lease, I would imagine if there is, and also having a very favorable rent,
Yeah.
like all the others, it appears that might be the case.
Yeah, it could be. Without actually really doing some digging on that, I couldn't tell you.
Okay, and you can't tell by looking at these tenants how good their covenants are. They could be millionaires who are controlling these companies, who've signed direct.
Yes, of course. Probably not renting at 495 Barry, but yeah,
Well, no, but if they have a business, then that's adheres to what they're doing. It might just be one of their interests. We can't tell the covenant by looking at
absolutely, absolutely, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And the you indicated another thing is the land to lease the area is low, and I acknowledge that. But I'm looking at the tenants, and I can't see any of these tenants by their names anyway. They look like they'd be bringing in big semis that would need a lot of land for parking and ingress and egress.
Yeah, so I mean, in general, That would be low for any property, Mr. Chair. Not just a storage warehouse.
Well, yeah, but it looks like
It does have some parking in the front, and you can see that in the assessor's pictures. But you know, from our perspective, the way that we look at properties, any industrial property that has a land to building ratio that low is below the average.
Okay, and you really believe that an 8% cap rate is reasonable for this property?
That's what we put in there based on the metrics that we use. You know, I can't say more than that. I mean, it could be slightly lower, I suppose. From my perspective, there's not much of a difference in value overall between the assessors and mine. So, could it be? Yes, I suppose so.
Okay, thank you very much. That's my questions. So we'll now proceed then with item number 3 on the agenda, which is the property at 300 Creek Crescent. And Mr. Rockney, when you're ready, we can hear your evidence.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-3577, roll number 0708033850 for the address of 300 Creek Crescent. We have a recommendation of $2,044,000 for the 2025 rule year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 2 buildings, 1 premise, 1 story, with an actual year built of 1985, as well as the effective year built is also 1985. A wall height of 12 to 20 feet. There's a leasable area of 20,097 square feet, a land to plan area of 5.85. Maps are provided on page 3 showing its location off of Murray Park Road and Creek Crescent. Exterior photos on page 4 and aerial photos on page 5 and 6. Our rent comparables are on page 7. With the lease start of 2017 to 2021, a area of 15,000 to 23,190 square feet. Effective year built of 1973 to 1986, and a net rent range of $7.45 to $11.50 per square foot. We provided some land comparables on page 8, as well as their aerial views. On page 10 is our income workup, but I will maybe amend that with the new recommended value. So the leasable area of 20,097 square feet, we had it at a $7.57 rent, but we're amending it to $7, providing a potential rent of $140,679, with the same vacancy at 4.5% and a shortfall at $4 per square foot, plus expenses at 3%. It gives us a NOI of $126,701 with the same cap rate of 6.2%. Gives us the total of $2,044,000. On page 12 is our capitalization rates. The 6.2% is within our industrial range. Page 14 through 17 is the income and expense questionnaire we've received. Page 16, it appears there's no rent, so I'm seeing it as its owner occupied. Therefore, based on this evidence, we would like to suggest our new value of $2,044,000. Are there any questions?
A minute. Okay, so we have a reduction of $161,000.
Uh,
Roughly speaking, yeah.
And you know what, Mr. Navarro, that comes, okay, I'm going to ask you a question. Is that acceptable to you?
Absolutely.
It's pretty close to what you're asking for.
That is, actually. I-
It's
I
actually
accept it.
closer than 5% of what you're asking for.
Yes, I believe the assessor and I had previous conversations about this one, so I do agree with it.
Okay, so you're accepting the recommendation then.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Stevens, do you have any questions?
No questions, thank you.
And I don't either, so thank you. So we can proceed then with our next property, which is item number 4, being 326 Salto Crescent. And Mr. Rockney, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Thank you. File number 24-2948 for roll number 070812555500 for the address of 326 Salto Crescent. We're defending the assessed value of $5,640,000 for the 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of one building with 5 premises, 1 story, with an actual and effective year build of 1984, a wall height of 24 feet. Leasable area is 51,483 square feet, and a land to plan area of 2.32. On page 3 shows it's located in the Murray Industrial Park, near of Murray Park Road, off of Morey Street. Exterior photos are provided on page 4 and aerial views on page 5 and 6. Our rent comparables are on page 7. With a lease start of 2018 to 2022, lease area of 7,517 to 12,684 square feet, a wall height of 17 to 21 feet, an effective year built of 1975 to 1990, and a range of rent of $7 per square foot to $13 per square foot. You'll find our income workup on page 8. The 5 premises adding up to 51,483 square feet has a blended rent of $8.12. Provide a potential rent of $417,902. We reduce that by a vacancy loss of 4.5% plus expenses at 3%, with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $377,856. We've capitalized that at 6.7%, and which generates our capitalized value of $5,639,642, in which we've rounded up to our final total of $5,640,000. Our capitalization rates are on page 10, in which our cap rate of 6.7 is within this range. We received documentation pertaining to the income and expense questionnaire, page 12 through 20. Here's its blank. However, provided an income statement on page 19 and 20 with a variety of rents, which ranges $6 to $7.95. It appears there's some step ups at the bottom of page 20. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $5,640,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
I don't have any questions, Mr. Chair.
Mr. Merritt, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Stevenson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Okay, I'm looking at the statement on page number 19, and I just actually I have to say I didn't see it before, which I sorry about. Does it show anywhere that there's large vacancies here?
That I could see myself. No, and it appears to be, oh, well, there is a, on page 20, it shows a vacant space. That
Okay.
bottom one.
Oh yeah, okay.
Mhm. But it appears it's just that one.
Okay, thank you. That's concludes my question. Mr. Navarro, you can proceed.
Sure. Thank you. This is 326 Salto Crescent. On page 4, 6, and 7, you can see some overhead pictures of the property. This would not be your standard storage warehouse. It's more kind of an office, industrial office / retail type of warehouse. But I believe it does have some loading facilities as well. You can see that most of the rents were actually derived from the actuals on page 12, and that is based on the income approach. And we have made some adjustments in certain areas. So typically we will adjust when, or I will adjust when the rent is expiring close to or shortly after the reference date. So for this one, I've adjusted the rent upward to $7. And that's what I used for that vacant space as well. So we get a rent of $7.12. That's the rental rate. An annual income of $372,815. In terms of the vacancy, you can see on page 13 that the property has experienced some vacancy. So I've included all of the years that I looked at in terms of the vacancy just to have a closer look at it. So the vacancy has varied over the years. So in 2022, it was 21.4. In 2021, it was 0. In 2019, it was 15.5. In 2018, it was 21.2%. So as an average over those 4 years, that's 14.5%. Now, 14.5% is getting close to chronic vacancy. So what we would consider chronic would be starting at about 15%. I haven't gone there. I've gone to 9%, which I think is a fair trade-off in terms of acknowledging that this property has been experiencing higher than normal vacancy over the years, while not going to that top end figure of 14.5. In terms of the shortfall and non-recovered expenses, we haven't deviated from the market. So we've used the same shortfall and non-recovered expense allowance that the assessor has. And in terms of vacancy, in terms of capitalization rate, we're close to where the assessor is at 6.75. Overall, we get an income value of $4,596,212 or $4,596,000 rounded. I think the bulk of the difference is that we're acknowledging slightly higher vacancy than normal. And I think that's what's accounting for the disparity between the assessor's value and ours. In the appendix, as I noted, I've included the income expenses over the years that I observed, especially for the purpose of analyzing the vacancy. So I am open for questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rockney. Any questions?
I do, and sorry, more of a clarification in regards to, and maybe you mentioned it and I did not quite understand. In regards to the chronic vacancy, is it concerning that one unit or was it in regards to all the units?
No, that is an overall vacancy for the entire property. Regardless if it's made up of one unit or multiple units, I mean, we look at vacancy and we cut it off at a certain point. So what we consider chronic is starting at about 15% and upward of that. So we're close to that. Yeah, we decided to go with a vacancy slightly lower than 10%. So at 9%, I think we're at. Hopefully that explains it.
A bit. I'm not understanding the vacancy issue. Is it because in the previous years they haven't had these tenants in the space, or?
Okay, so the way we look at vacancy is preferably over multiple years. We wouldn't take 1 year of vacant space and attribute the overall vacancy to it. Like we wouldn't assign a higher vacancy based on 1 year. Okay, what we're looking at is observing at least 3 or more years. In this case, we've looked at 4 years, and we've averaged them out. From that perspective, the vacancy is higher, and that's generally how most appraisers look at vacancy as well. And I would say that most assessors, when they, for example, adjust vacancy for a particular reason, it's based on a very similar analysis of observing more, a higher than market vacancy overall for a property. So our market vacancy is, I believe, it would be in your brief, is it 4.5%? Yeah, 4.5%. So that would be what the market is saying, but that's not what this building is saying. It's saying that it's actually performing slightly above that not favorably. The vacancy is higher than the market. So that's why we've adjusted the vacancy for this property.
Okay. In regards to the current one that is vacant, are you aware of any advertisement concerning it?
Sorry, Madam says I caught maybe 10% of that. So
Oh, for the one that is currently vacant, are you aware of any current advertisement for it or having it rented out?
I'm not aware of it, but that's because I didn't look at it. But typically, this building and this client is advertising. Yes, they would likely be advertising. And just from the movement, again, you can see that 1 unit was vacant in 2021, and then it was occupied. It was completely leased up in 2021, and then it got more vacancy in 2022. So that's telling me that obviously they're leasing it, they're advertising it.
Thank you. Those are all my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Steffes, any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Merritt, any questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Navarro, there's a discrepancy in regards to the leasable area. You are higher than the city?
Yes, I am.
So who is correct? 1,000 square feet.
Yeah, so
But your calculations are based at 52 and the cities are 51,000.
So I'm looking at page 61. And basically the last page of the brief. And you can see on the right-hand side, the rentable area of 52,332 square feet.
Okay.
So that's where we get it from. And what I'll say to that is that as units are rented and leased up and then they're vacated, there are some changes sometimes based on what the rent up is, like what they may not necessarily have the same layout as the previous tenant, so it may be slightly different.
Yeah, but the only problem is, Mr. Navarro, is that there's a difference in regards to value too. So
Yeah.
this is what I'm after.
Yeah, so as I mentioned before to the assessor and while I was presenting, is that the biggest difference is obviously that we're accounting for more vacancy.
Yes, but like I say, you know, 1,000 square feet, and you cap it at, you know, 10% or 5%, makes a hell of a difference. Agree?
Can you explain that?
I- What do you mean, explain it?
So 1,000 square feet capped at,
Well, you know, like just simple terms. If you have 1,000 square feet, you know, X number of dollars, and you cap it at 10%, that is the value. But you know, you're closer to, you know, to the 5% rate, so it's double that.
Mhm.
That's what I'm saying.
Okay,
Roughly figure, you know, like roughly when you do calculations like that.
mhm. Yes,
So, do you want to revise your figure?
Mr. Chair, we're going by what the owner says is there in terms of the overall size.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I have no further questions then. Thank you.
Yeah. Mr. Navarro, I guess what I'm honing in on is because this is what makes it here, is the vacancy factor. And I'm looking at your page 13, and you show vacancies for 4 years, 18, 19, 21, and 22. Do you know if there's vacancy in that property today?
All right, today,
Yeah, well, or 23, was there vacancies in 23? You know,
I didn't look at the vacancy for 23, sorry.
how about 24? Because I know it's the way the property exists today, valued on the parameters in 2023. What is
Yeah,
it? Are the vacancies in 2024?
I couldn't tell you, Mr. Chair. It's, I mean,
Okay, are the
we cut it.
vacancies, are there current vacancies in 2025?
No, again, I don't go beyond the reference date, so.
Yeah, but Mr. Navarro, isn't it important if you're trying to tell us that there's a chronic vacancy there that affects the current tax for 2025, that we know the circumstances, if whether that was something that has been rectified, or is it historical? And if it's
Well-
historical, would that affect what a purchaser would pay for that property today if it's fully leased and has been in 23, 24, and 25?
Yeah, I couldn't tell you, Mr. Chair. I mean, as far as I know, we look at the economic conditions as of the reference date, and vacancy would be an economic condition, so we wouldn't look at it beyond that.
Okay, and I agree with that ordinarily, Mr. Navarro, but in this case, you're asking us to extend what is a normal vacancy factor because of circumstances you say applies to this property. And
Okay,
incumbent upon the applicant in such cases to show that there is in fact a chronic vacancy there that has persisted and not something that might just be historical.
well, Mr. Chair, if I were to include 2024 or 2025 vacancy, I
And
mean,
2020 and 2023. I'm just saying,
Yeah.
you know, we wouldn't be looking at value. You're asking for a chronic vacancy determination. So
Mhm.
I think that is, we're looking at the value if it was sold in 2023, but it's based on the property as it exists today, is it not?
That is the current physical condition, not the economic conditions.
Well, no, the economic conditions do, because the economic condition, okay, it doesn't matter. The economic condition would change though if it's fully leased. You're asking for us to reduce taxes today based on that this property is not producing what it should be producing, so somebody wouldn't pay as much for it. But we don't know what it's doing today because the last reference we have is 2022.
Okay. You know, all I can default to, Mr. Chair, is what we write on page 9 of the brief, which is the section labeled analysis. So, I mean, that right there spells out how we do these assessments. So again, if I were to include 2023, 2024, 2025 vacancy, I think everybody would point that out, especially if it worked in my favor. I'm pretty sure most assessors would be screaming at the top of their lungs that you can't include post-reference date materials.
Well, I think that it's in your favor, not in your favor to express it, but in fact, though, you're asking us to go beyond what the model dictates for vacancy. And because of that, you got to show that this property has special circumstances. And I'm asking you, is it chronically vacant or is it not? And I don't know based on the evidence that I have before me.
Well, I mean, we can start to include future dates in our analysis. And if the board is willing to accept that, we will do it.
No, you know what? I think I would like to know that, you know, without doing that, saying that this vacancy situation, without referring to amounts, is ongoing and continues to this day.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, you know, I think that you've answered the question as best you can, so I'm not going to belabor it. So that's my questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so we have then item number 5, which is the property at 340 Salto Crescent. Mr. Lockney, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Thank you, yes. File number 24-2949, roll number 0708125430 for the address of 340 Salto Crescent. We are defending the assessed value of $6,937,000 for the 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 2 buildings with 12 premises, 1 story, the actual year built and effective year built of 1980, wall height of 20 to 24 feet, a leasable area of 62,917 square feet with a land to plan area of 2.92. On page 3 shows the location situated in the Murray Industrial Park. It is near Maury Street. Exterior photos on page 4 and 5, as well as aerial photos following. We provided 10 rent comparables on page 7. All are flex warehouses, with half of them being in the same market region. Leasing starting in 2018 to 2022, an area range of 2,000 to 8,106 square feet, wall height of 14 to 24 feet, and an effective year built of 1973 to 1984, and a net rent of $6.50 to $11.55 per square foot. On page 8, you'll see our income workup. The 12 premises adding up to 62,917 square feet has a blended rent of $8.41 per square foot, providing potential rent of $519,452. We reduced that by a vacancy loss of 4.5%, plus expenses at 3%, with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $478,672. We've capitalized that at 6.9%, in which generates our capitalized value of $6,937,275. We've rounded that down to our final total of $6,937,000. On page 10 has our capitalization rates. Our cap rate of 6.9 is near the high end of the industrial range. The document representing the income and expense questionnaire is on page 12 through page 20, providing an income statement on page 17, as well as a variety of rents on page 19 and 20. Ranging from $6.25 to $11.35. appears as well, there's some step-ups, description on page 20. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $6,937,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
I have no questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, any questions?
On page 8 of your brief, you've got a total of 519,452 for potential rents, and then in your income valuation, you got potential rents of 528,955. Why the discrepancy? Am I missing something?
It's a good question. A good question. I'm not sure which one is incorrect. The leasable area is the same down below. I can do a quick calculation here.
We just got to add up all those other totals.
That's what I'm trying to do. Yeah. See what it comes up.
We can try punching them in too.
That's a good catch. Getting the 519,452.
Yeah.
I don't know why it changed there. Actually, I don't have the tools at my desk here. Because that would change it for sure. Well, it may take me some time to calculate it.
Yeah, it's a difference of only about 126,000, right? But
Yeah, not far off.
no,
Wish I could calculate it, but unfortunately I don't have Excel here on this
You
computer.
can do it by hand here. Times 49%. And
perhaps we can come back to it and I can figure it out.
I was just doing a quick calculation myself when I was trying to figure out why I couldn't do it, and then I was like, oh, there's two different numbers here. So it's
Yeah, no, that's a good catch. That's the first. I have not seen that happen because it's automatically generated. So
Hmm.
that's a bit of a, yeah, a little error. Okay, I think I'm able to, it just might take some time.
I guess we can leave it. We agree to disagree.
I think so.
Well, I think we have to redo the calculations, actually.
Sorry, Harvey?
I think we have to recalculate based on
So then,
519.
yeah, the value based on what's listed there would be 68,10,908.
Yeah, I'll work through the numbers. I've started, but when we have a break, I'll work through them.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, in the meantime, any questions, Mr. Merritt?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you. And I don't believe I have either. So, so I guess this, Mr. Navarro, you can proceed.
Okay, this is 340 Salto. You can see some pictures of this property on pages 6 and 7. This is close to the previous property as well. And on page 12, you can see our analysis in terms of the income. So we've reported a rent, or we're using a rental rate of $7.77, primarily based on the rents that are in place, with some rents being adjusted upward, for a total rent of $487,455. And on page 13, you can see again some of the same issues that we had on the previous property in terms of vacancy. We've looked at 4 years, 13.9%. We've adjusted that to 9.25% on page 17 with a 7% cap rate. And we come to an end value of 5,798,195 or 5,798,000 rounded. The rest of it is just the income and expenses that we reviewed for all of the years. So I'm open for questions.
Okay, Ms. Duratni, any questions?
I actually was able to recalculate some of our comments. It actually brought down the value slightly. So the 519,452, keeping it at that figure, and the cap rate at 6.9% brought it down to 6,810,000.
Thank you.
Problem. And no questions. Thank you.
Okay, and Jeff, if you have any questions you have no questions you indicate?
I do
Sorry.
not. That's okay. I do not.
Okay, Mr. Merritt, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Mrs. Evans, do you have any questions?
We may have just lost a panel member.
Yeah, it looks like.
Oh no.
Okay. I'll just put us in recess if that's okay, Mr. Chair, just so we can regain them.
Okay, that's fine. We can recess. Let's take then
Okay.
5
Hold on, looks like it's
minutes
back.
back.
Yeah,
Can we take 10, Mr. Chairman?
Should we maybe just finish this since we're so close and then take 10?
But I think somebody disappeared.
No, I think we got him.
I'm
Yeah.
back.
Got it back.
Okay,
Okay.
proceed, yeah.
So I was going to ask Mr. Stevens if he had any questions.
No, I don't. I don't know. You guys all seized. I was still alive, and then it rebooted me on my end, so I don't know what happened.
Okay, well, welcome back. So, Mr. Navarro, so I see on this property as well, we have vacancies and actual rents are lower than what is indicated by the model.
Correct.
And again, I'm not going to belabor the question I asked you last time, but on this one, you're asking us to do a 9.5% vacancy or 9.25% vacancy, and the other you want to 9%, correct?
Correct.
And that's what brings you to basically where you are with what is it, a 7% cap rate?
Yeah.
Okay, I think that's my questions. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, and you know what? At this time, we will take 10 minutes then. And then when we're back then at, let's say, 2:45. If we
Okay,
get that. And we'll
Yep.
proceed then with the next item on the agenda, which is item number 8. Thank you. So we're jumping ahead then to item number 8, being the property at 1051 Sherwin Road. And Mr. Rockney, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-3157, roll number 070102461000 for the address of 1051 Sherwin Road. We're defending the assessed value of $5,505,000 for the 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 6 buildings with 1 premise and 1 story, an actual year built of 1961 to 2005. We do have an effective year built of 1967 with a wall height of 12 to 22 feet. Leasable area of 56,135 square feet. Land to plan area is 5.06. Maps are provided on page 3 showing its location. It is near Route 90 and Saskatchewan Avenue. Exterior photos are provided on page 4 and 5 with aerial photos following. Page 8 has our rent comparables. Lease start date of 2018 to 2022. A lease area of 41,450 to 59,458 square feet. A wall height of 16 to 22 feet. Effective year build of 1963 to 1973. And a net rent range of $5.67 to $8.27 per square foot. Page 9 has some land comparable sales and their aerial views on page 10 and 11. Page 12 is the income workup with the leasable area of 56,135 square feet with a rent of $6.35 per square foot. Provide a potential rent of $356,457. We reduced that by a vacancy loss of 4.5% plus expenses at 3% with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $320,100. We've capitalized that at 6.65%, in which generates our capitalized value of $4,813,534 with additional land value of $691,000. Providing our total value of $5,505,000. Our capitalization rates are on page 14, in which our 6.65 is within our industrial range. Page 16 is the income and expense questionnaire, advising the net income type, with a rent income of 234,500, and a leasable area of 56,135 square feet. Calculating it to be $4.18 of a rent. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $5,505,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Navarro, any questions?
I do have one question. You've included an excess land value. Can you answer why you've included that?
Due to the land plan area 5.06.
Is that typical for a trucking facility?
It is typical with the land plan area, and that land area of 284,000.
Okay, so would a facility like this not need more land?
It does require the land, yes. I believe it's a typical additional land due to the land area.
Thank you. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Mr. Barrett, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, any questions?
No questions at this time. Thank you.
So, Mr. Ruckney, I guess I've got some questions. I know that you're charging the model is charging for additional land. I'm looking on page number 7, because that's got your overhead shots. I'm looking at the land, and what in fact, what can you identify where the additional land is?
I believe it's due to the amount of space that it holds. I don't think it's a particular space, but just because the whole premise is larger. I think that's why. It's because it's just a larger space accounting for that.
Okay, so there's no piece of this land then that could be split off and sold separately, to your knowledge?
Not that I know of. Like, I'm looking at the entrance space there. I mean, there is, I believe it appears to be 2 entrances. Could be wrong. So one could technically be another premise, but I'm not certain.
And if you were to put another building, do you know where you'd put another building on this property so it wouldn't interfere with the trucks? And how big could that building be? I'm just wondering, additional land, I think, has to be identified as additional land that, if it can't be identified, anyway, I've asked that question.
Question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The model does think sometimes in different ways, I guess.
Yeah, and I suppose they would then be classified as a different type of property in that case, right? It would be reclassified if it's no longer for the truck industry, but that is a fair.
No, I mean, if I could say there might be additional land even for the owner, if they could show me where a building could be put that wouldn't interfere with the usage of the property the way it is now. But I don't know if I can see that at all. I mean, but I'm not an expert in that. That's why I asked you.
Neither am I. Neither am
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Okay, Mr. Navarro, you can proceed.
This is 1051 Sherwin Road. You can see the picture, the overhead picture on page 7. You can see that there's 2 buildings there. And this is a trucking facility, so obviously the site needs parking. On page 13, you can see we've used some we've looked at some rental comparisons. And we've used a rent of $6.15 per square foot for this site. Standard vacancy and non-recovered expenses and shortfall. Page 14. Again, I think looking back at the way that we've handled this property, the assessor has typically agreed to remove the excess land value. I don't know why they put it back on every year, but every year it seems to come off. And there's a reason for that, because there are certain types of properties that require more land than typical. So that would be your trucking facilities, that would be your car dealerships, and typically not with excess land. So on page 18, you can see my workup, again, a 650, 615 rent. I fear there may be a slight error in the calculation in terms of vacancy that was put on this one. I'm just going back and checking to see whether that's the case. Nope, 450. Shortfall of $4, 3% for non-recoverables. That gives a net operating income of $309,700 and a capitalization rate of 6.75. An income value of $4,588,144 or $4,588,000 rounded. And the largest reason is obviously because we've taken out the excess land. So I'm open for questions.
Mr. Rockney, any questions?
I just want clarification to your final value. Again, was what? The $4,588,000?
Yeah.
We were definitely in contact in removing that excess land. Yeah, so I would at this point be in agreement of that. So I would actually recommend.
Okay, if you take the excess land off, you'd have a valuation of $4,813,534, or rounded to $4,814,000, which is not as far as Mr. Navarro goes, because he's got a slightly higher cap rate. But Mr. Navarro, is that acceptable?
Yes, Mr. Chair, it is.
Okay, so you're making a recommendation then of $4,814,000. Is that correct, Mr. Rockney? Yeah, that removes the excess land. And Mr. Navarro, you've indicated you've accepted that. That's fine.
Yeah.
And okay, so we can proceed then with item number 9, which is the last matter on the docket today. And that would be the property at 1151 Sherwood Road. Mr. Rockney, when you're ready, you can proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. File number 24-3069, roll number 0701073500 for the address of 1151 Sherwin Road. We're defending the assessed value of $6,890,000 for the 2025 roll year based on the reference date of April 1, 2023. It consists of 3 buildings with 6 premises, 1 story, a actual year built of 1965 to 1989, with an effective year built of 1973, wall height of 19 to 22 feet, leasable area of 62,000 square feet, and a land-to-plan area of 2.05. Maps are provided on page 3. So similar area as the previous property. Exterior photos are on page 4, aerial views on page 5 and 6. We provided our rent comparables on page 7, all storage warehouses in the same market region, with leasing starting in 2020 to 2022, area range of 4,200 to 29,157 square feet, wall height of 16 to 18 feet, an effective year built of 1964 to 1975, and a net rent of $7.31 to $9 per square foot. You'll find our income workup on page 8. The 6 premises adding up to 62,000 square feet has a blended rent of $7.39 per square foot, providing potential rent of $458,293. We reduced that by a vacancy loss of 4.5% plus expenses at 3%, with the shortfall at $4 per square foot. This gives us the net operating income of $413,380. We've capitalized that at 6%, in which generates our capitalized value of $6,889,667, in which we've rounded up to our final value of $6,890,000. Our capitalization rates are on page 10, in which our cap rate of 6% is within our industrial range. The documentation provided to us, page 12 through 20, regarding the income and expense questionnaire. The income statement is on page 19 to 20, advising of 62,000 square feet, I believe, and the base rent of $587,811, providing a blended rent of $9.48. With the different rates below on page 20. Based on this evidence, we believe that the assessed value of $6,890,000 to be fair and equitable, and ask for it to be confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions, Mr. Navarro?
I don't have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mrs. Stevenson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Merritt, any questions?
No, thank you.
Okay, I guess my only question is on the cap rate. I noticed that the model has chosen the cap rate of 6%, which is quite a bit lower than the close by property that we dealt with just before. That was, I think, was that 6.9? I'm not to look back.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering why there'd be such a, oh no, that was 6.65, I think. Anyway, just wondering why there'd be such a large discrepancy on a neighboring property that seems to be the same age and same vicinity.
You're right, yeah. So the previous one was 6.65. And this one was 6. It appears a bit of a newer effective age, being 1973. Possibly the land to plan area being lower.
Well, lower would should, yeah. Why would that create a higher or lower cap rate? There's less.
Yep. Fair point.
Okay.
Yeah, and the leasable area is the same. Good question. We'll look at, yeah, lower land area. The wall heights are about the same. Yeah, it's a good question why the model generated a lower cap rate for this one.
Okay, well, that's a good question, and there aren't answers for every question that we ask. So I don't expect that you'd have that answer, but I thought I'd ask just in case you did.
For sure.
Okay, Mr. Navarro, you can proceed with your evidence.
Yep, so we have 1151 Sherwin Road. And on page 6, you can see an overhead picture, and on page 7, the map and location. So on page 12, you can see our income approach workup on the rent side. And so we have a rental rate of $7.57 for this property. And we did look at some comparisons and also the rents that are in place. But most have been adjusted because there's quite a bit of vacancy in this location. On page 14, you can see the vacancy. So over a 4-year period, again, 64.2% vacancy. Out of curiosity, Mr. Chair, I actually did just text one of my colleagues and they actually did look into the 2023 vacancy. And it was 64.2%. I looked at the 2025 and they are currently advertising a unit about 16,400 square feet, which would take the vacancy to about 27.5%. And that would be current. So this building, again, has been functioning in that chronic vacancy area. So you can see that we have assigned it a vacancy of 15%, which is where chronic vacancy starts. And chronic vacancy from even the city's perspective can range all the way up to 25%. So we've assigned it at 15%. Shortfall of $4 per square foot, 3% other, and the capitalization rate that we've assigned to this property is 7.25. You can see the entire workup on page 17. So again, there you see the 453,167. That is the potential. 15% vacancy, 4% shortfall, or $4 shortfall, 3% for non-recoverables, and a 7.25 cap rate, giving an income value of $4,657,878. That's $4,658,000 rounded. The cap rate is, again, a reflection of the property itself. It's not performing well. So we've adjusted for that. We've adjusted for the plan area and also the height of the building, which is between 19 and 22 feet. So the rest of the appendix is basically just the income and expenses that were reviewed over the different years, 4 years in particular. So I'm open for questions.
Mr. Rodney, any questions?
I do just one in regards to, so you had mentioned that they were actively having it listed.
Correct.
Do you happen to know what they were asking for?
In terms of rent,
Yes.
so that would be a current rent. So I'm not going to disclose what they're asking for in 2025.
Fair enough. Yes, that it was in regards to 16,000 square feet.
16,000, I believe, 454 square feet.
Okay, those are all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Stevenson, any questions?
No questions, thank you.
Mr. Mayor, any questions?
I have none, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Okay, and I don't either, so thank you very much. So we've now completed all matters that were listed on the docket today. We're going to adjourn this hearing, or actually call it to a close, and we'll be rendering our decisions as soon as possible. Thank you for your attendances, your briefs, and answering all the questions that we had.
Thank you very much. Have a good day, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.